playbook, triad, the triangle edition. I got my fellas back with me. People have been talking. They like the combination. We apologize for the technical difficulties that we had last week, but we're working them out. This is going to be a work in progress for us. So there might be some things we have to smooth out from week to week, but we're going to keep coming back at y'all. I got my guy, Mr. Terrence Austin T is back in the house. And we got the coach. Mr. Hot Rod is back in the house, host of Let's Talk About It. Fellas, well, let's get deep into it, man. I was just getting out of bed the other morning, and I think we should start to show off with this. I was getting out of bed. I didn't even need no alarm clock. Usually when I get up, I grab a cup of coffee, and then I head to campus. Well, first thing I do is I look at my phone, and T sent me a text, and he asked me a question, and he said, is Carmelo Anthony a Hall of Famer? And I know this topic has been bounced around on a lot of different podcasts, content creators, NBA shows, stuff like that, but we haven't had a chance to tackle it yet. So I sent my response back to T. T sent his response back to me, and we were at opposite ends of the coin. But you know what? I always try to look at stuff from other people's perspective, because I'm not always right. And so T made some really, really good points when it comes to Carmelo Anthony. And I'll let him start off. T, is Carmelo Anthony a Hall of Famer or not?
Coach, once again, thanks for allowing me on your show. No, Melo is not a Hall of Famer. Okay. Hall of very good, but not a Hall of Famer. Okay, now I'm one for wishing that the NBA had its own separate hall, okay? Because you got the Basketball Hall of Fame, and then there's no such thing as an NBA Hall of Fame. As far as the Basketball Hall of Fame, I guess he meets criteria for the Basketball Hall of Fame, because you throw in what he did at Syracuse, you throw in what he did on the world stage in the Olympics, and, his stats, with the Knicks, I guess with Denver, and then I forgot who else he was with. When you throw all that in, compile all that in, I guess maybe so, but not in my book. Because also, too, if you have to have a debate, he doesn't belong.
Good point.
No doubt Magic is a Hall of Famer. No doubt Jordan is a Hall of Famer. No doubt Kobe's a Hall of Famer. No doubt Larry Bird, Kevin McHale are Hall of Famers. But when it comes to Melo, if it has to get down to a barbershop debate, this and that, no, I don't think so. Now, when you sent, the stats, again, based on the Basketball Hall of Fame and compiling everything that he's done, okay, but when I think Hall of Famer, I don't think, Melo as a Hall of Famer. I think of him as just very good. Just like in baseball, I think Kenny Lofton is a Hall of Famer. I really do. Yep. But others say no, just Hall of very good, So that's just my take on Melo. See, what do you guys think? I don't think he is.
Before I throw it to Rod, T, you make some valid points. And I think your stance is probably on the way things are currently constructed in the NBA on who they admit to the Hall of Fame. He probably is a Hall of Famer. But I think you may question what the criteria is to get into the Hall of Fame. So if they were to, really hammer down on some of the criteria of what it takes, because in the Hall of Fame, essentially you want the great of the great. And so right now it's a little bit watered down, I think is what you're saying. I thought about that when you sent me that text, and I thought, you know what, T makes some really good points. Hot Rod, what do you think, man?
All right, here we go. So I get the way that T broke it down. Yes, it's the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And so at that point, when you look at Carmelo's accomplishments, I mean, he leads USA basketball in points, all-time point scorer in USA basketball history. He in terms of his NBA career, and this is how I look at it. And I look at someone who comes into the game and changes the complexity of the game. And so it doesn't necessarily have to go with championships. I can't stand when people talk about, okay, well, they won so many championships, because if that be the case, then Robert Horry should be in the Hall of Fame. But he's not. Okay, if we're going to base that on championships. No. I'm looking at when Carmelo Anthony came into the league was in a influx. It was a transition. It was the Allen Iverson group that was on their way out. When Carmelo went to Denver as a rookie, you had LeBron in Cleveland. I think Chris Paul was in New Orleans at the time. Chris Bosh was in Toronto. That group, the Banana Boat group that they call them, that group came in, and it was a shift that took place in the NBA at that time. When you went out to Denver, before Carmelo hit Denver, Denver was so-so. But when you got Carmelo Anthony there, you had to play basketball. And Carmelo Anthony changed the complexity of the Denver Nuggets. Now, then he was traded to the Knicks. All right, Carmelo Anthony was that guy in the Knicks. The numbers add up in terms of the basketball aspect of it, okay? Carmelo didn't win any championships in the pros, but that's, like I said, we're not basing that on championships, okay? We're basing it on how Carmelo Anthony came in and changed the game. When you talk to other NBA players, they will tell you that they were more fearful of Carmelo than they was LeBron, okay? Because Carmelo at the time was a professional scorer. This guy could score at any point, in the game. Now, I think what tainted him a bit was when he went out to Los Angeles. That was the other team, that he ended up playing with. He played with the Lakers for a minute. And I think that's what kind of tainted it. If we just look at his body of work from the Denver Nuggets and the New York Knicks, to me, I don't even argue the fact that he's a Hall of Famer, okay? Now, when on T's point, when you talk about the criteria, if it was just based on the NBA, and that's what I'm saying, the Laker thing kind of tainted it. It really did. But if I'm basing it off of his time with the Nuggets, his impact in Denver, and then his impact in New York, you can't. To me, you can't argue it. I will throw a caveat out here. And I will argue, because there's another person that's going in the Naismith Hall of Fame with him that I kind of like, I don't know. And that's Dwight Howard. But we'll get into that at another time, okay? But there's an impact that Dwight Howard had in the game when he came, okay? So to answer the question, I believe that Carmelo is a Hall of Famer based on not just the numbers, but his impact in the game. But I can see where T is coming from.
Oh, yeah, T's points is valid, man. I sat back and I thought about it, for a couple of days. And I think, I have to agree there should be maybe a little bit of a higher standard. But as long as the criteria is what it is, I mean, that's all we have right now. And that's why I think you got to give Melo the nod. I sent out some stats about Carmelo and why he got in, and I'm looking at those right now, and I'm just going to talk about a few of them, because I think when you look at his body of work, it just gets him there. It really gets him there. You're talking about an NBA career where, he played 19 seasons. I mean, there's not a lot of players out there that can play 19 seasons, 22.5 points per game, 6 rebounds, 10 All-Star appearances, 6-time All-NBA selection, league scoring champ 2012, 2013. Then he's 10th all-time among NBA scorers. And I think the international success is really what got him over the hump. 3-time Olympic gold medalist, also a member of the 2004 Olympic bronze team. So I think when you put all that stuff together compared to some of the other guys that are probably questionable that have entered the Hall of Fame, I think Carmelo Anthony is there as long as the criteria is what it is. Now, I'm going to throw some names out there to you guys, and I want to see if you guys think they are Hall of Famers. The first name I'm going to throw out there is Grant Hill. Is Grant Hill a Hall of Famer?
kind of borderline, if you ask me.
I know.
Great player, but the injury bug always got him, you know?
Yeah.
Came from great stock. I remember his dad, Calvin Hill, you know, with the Cowboys and closing his career out with the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, his father, great guy, and I can see where Grant got his athleticism from. But again, it's kind of similar to Carmelo. If we gotta argue it. No, he's not. You know, I'd say borderline.
Yeah. Rod?
If you going by the numbers, no.
Okay.
Once again, I go back and I talk, and I'm gonna keep reiterating the impact that he had in the game. At one point in time, Grant Hill was looked at as the next one. You're right, T. The next one. He was looked at. I watched film. I watched him embarrass Scottie Pippen. Okay, I watched him dunk over Alonzo Mourning as if he was a 4-year-old. I mean, when Grant Hill was healthy, he personified supreme athleticism. And you didn't see all that when he was at Duke, but that's because he had Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley and those guys. But then when he got to the pros, you like, who is this?
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
What hurt him the most was, of course, the injuries. And when he ended up playing on that bad ankle, because he was trying to help the Pistons, who weren't going to the playoffs at the time, go to the playoffs. And that's what caused problems in his career. But as you ask me sitting here, no, I wouldn't consider Grant Hill a Hall of Famer.
Okay, I'm going to get through another couple of these because some of these are really interesting. You know, the old Golden State Warriors, Run TMC, is Chris Mullin an NBA Hall of Famer?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got some tough ones,
He was
man.
something. Yeah, he was something. Wow, Lionel. That's another one. Right there, teetering on the edge. You know, and he was awesome too. He was a great player. He really really was. And knew the game, team player.
Yep.
You know, how would I put it? Yeah, but it's close. It really really is. You know.
Yeah.
All right,
Rod, what do
so
you think,
here
man?
I go. Chris Mullin was an absolute assassin, okay, for the Golden State
Yes, he
Warriors.
was.
He was an assassin in his career. Is he a Hall of Famer? No. How did he get to the Hall of Fame? Dream Team.
Okay.
Remember, you're talking about the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. He part of the Dream Team. But as an individual, do I look at Chris Mullin as a Hall of Famer? No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
That's why I think some of these international ball, you know.
Yeah. No, go
ahead. No, I was just about to say, once you put on that USA jersey, and then, you know, there's another level to that when you talk about the dream team, you know, the best team ever assembled to go out and try to get gold. I mean, you know, I agree with you. I believe that was a big reason why he got in. I mean, you can't be a part of the dream team and not be in the Hall of Fame. I got another name for you. Dennis Rodman.
Oh, yeah.
Is Dennis Rodman in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt. Yes, he is. Yeah.
Why is Dennis Rodman a no doubt?
Because how would I put it? What, Lionel? I'm getting tongue twisted. He gave his all. He gave his all. He gave his body, defense, rebounds, getting under the other player's skin.
Yep.
How would I put it? Hard to manage off the court, but once he was on the court, he was all about business. Yeah, no doubt. He was a Hall of Famer. Yeah, no doubt. Hands down.
Yep. Rod, what you think, man?
So Dennis Rodman, to me, yes, he's an absolute Hall of Famer. Dennis Rodman could guard 1 through 5. Okay.
Yeah.
He was that nimble, that quick. He was a Swiss Army knife. He was one of the greatest rebounders in the game. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't know about Dennis Rodman is when he was in college, he led the nation in scoring.
Okay.
Okay.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And so He came to Detroit and he was given a role and he played that role to championships. Now, get away from off the court stuff. Get away from that. Just look at what he did for the Pistons, for the Bulls, for the Spurs, for the Lakers, all the teams that he played, the Mavericks. He continued to do what he did. He was tough to beat defensively. Okay.
Yep.
Jordan said that Joe Dumars was the hardest person that guarded him. But he cannot deny Dennis Rodman was always there. Magic Johnson did not realize in the championship that he was being guarded by one of the best defensive players in the game. So to me, that is an absolute no doubt. Dennis Rodman's a Hall of Famer.
Yep, no doubt. I agree.
Yeah, Dennis Rodman, you can argue, depending on, how in-depth you are with basketball, is probably one of the pound for pound best basketball players, one of the best athletes to ever grace the NBA. You're talking about an undersized power forward with nothing but heart and toughness that led the league in rebounds for several years. And then every team that he seemed to be on were teams that were catapulted to the championship, and he was a big part of that. In my eyes, that is called a force multiplier. So when it comes to Dennis Rodman, I know there's a lot of aficionados out there that, don't look at his game as probably having one of the best games that's ever been in the league. No, he wasn't flashy. He didn't have the best jump shot. He didn't have the best handles. But you knew that when you went up against Dennis Rodman on any given night, that you better bring your lunch pail, because he gave every inch of his body, and you could see it in his stats. And he put together a great resume for the Hall of Fame. I got one more name for you guys that I want to throw around. This is a former Cleveland Cavalier. My man, high-flying Sean Kemp. His name has always been in kind of like borderline Hall of Famer. I'm interested to see where you guys think Sean Kemp stands.
Yeah, I'm okay with Sean Kemp. I really don't know his stats or anything, but I just remember the eye test with him, okay? The eye test, especially when he was in Seattle. Oh, yeah, he was awesome. He was. Not so much when he came to the Cavaliers, because he was kind of at the end of the road, but I remember the eye test when he played for those Seattle Supersonics, and no doubt, 5'2" player, just like they say in baseball, 5'2" player. Yeah, he was kind of similar, to Dennis, having all those, a Swiss Army knife, but was a scorer.
Yeah.
Also too, he was a problem on offense. So yeah, I'm okay with Sean Kemp. I am.
That's a hard one for me.
It is a hard one.
Because it's a hard one for me because, when you look at what he did in Seattle, him and Gary Payton, the Rain Man, that Sean Kemp, I'm like, all right, he had a Hall of Fame trajectory because, once again, like T said, he could defend, 1 through 5. He could jump out the gym. He actually when he started to develop his jump shot, he became lethal. Because at a point, you couldn't just sit. At one point, you could sit back and watch Sean Kemp shoot. But then when he started to hit the shot, now you got to come out on him, and he could just drive right by you and just jump over you. Okay? It's when he left Seattle that I'm like, because he went to Cleveland. He came to Cleveland. Cleveland wasn't very good. He was the best player, on the Cavaliers. I think the next best player was Tyrone Hill.
Yes, sir.
So, he was an all-star. Let's not get that. He was an all-star, but he was the best player on a bad team. You know what I mean? Their center was Chris Mims. Let's call it a buck. Okay. So, and then of course, him having some off the court battles, some substance abuse battles.
Tons of distraction.
Then he showed back up in Orlando, and he was over 300 pounds, and then he did a little stint in Portland, I believe. But if you go by what he did in Seattle, I can ride with that. If you go by his entire career, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah. When he was paired with the glove, Gary Payton, man, they were formidable in Seattle, man. But this is a good topic. This is why I like having you guys on the show. For UP Nation out there, you guys have no idea how much we talk sports throughout the week, through our group chat and stuff. This is why I wanted these guys on the show, to bring a little bit of that to you guys. We always talk about Vikings, but we have a group of our audience that likes to talk about other things. So this is why I got Rod and T on the show. One topic that came up this week was, and it was a strong topic in some instances, and then you guys were kind of piggybacking on it throughout the week, but people brought up the name Zion Williams. And I know they had a discussion on The Odd Couple, which is one of my favorite shows, about whether or not Zion is a bust. Now, the word bust can mean a lot of different things, and when I look at Zion, I wouldn't call him a bust in the traditional meaning of the word. Like, I wouldn't call him that. But, man, if people don't remember, Zion was supposed to be the next thing. I mean, the face of the league, kind of on the same hierarchy as a LeBron James type special player. I mean, he was to use a term, and I know the genders are different, but he was Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark when he was at Duke. I mean, he was a can't-miss prospect. Everybody was trying to get him. Teams were tanking to try to get him.
Yeah.
And Zion, when he's healthy, has played well and put up numbers, but he's missed more games than he's played, rarely ever healthy. And so he's just not what everybody expected him to be.
Yeah.
So the topic for today, fellas, is, think inside your brains. Let's talk about some of the biggest busts in the NBA. And it doesn't have to be and it really doesn't even have to be NBA. It could be any sport. Just one of the biggest busts. It doesn't have to be, someone that didn't do anything. I mean, it could also be someone that had high expectations that really didn't meet the mark. So I'll be interested in some of the names that you guys can throw out in terms of some of the biggest busts in sports.
Well, for me, Coach, the most recent one that comes to mind is based off the discussion this week on Odd Couple was Zion.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him a bust, but he's standing there at the bus stop, okay?
Yes.
He's at the bus stop waiting to get on. He's played, 250 or missed 250-something games and only played 214. He just didn't pan out. And it's unfortunate is that I don't think he had the right leadership, the right mentors around him. I think if he would have been in another organization, someone that could have really mentored him, looked out for him, encouraged him, stayed on him, I think you would have gotten more. On the court, he's great. He's a problem. He's somebody you have to game plan against. But he just couldn't stay on the court, and a lot of it was just what it seemed as though he wasn't really taking care of himself.
Yeah.
And again, I fault leadership. The leadership and the mentors that were supposed to be around him helping this guy out, So, again, as of most recently, as it was discussed this week, he's at the bus stop, I think. He's at the bus stop. He's still young enough to get it together. However, it's not going to happen with that organization. He's got to go to a grown-up and adult organization where, folks are going to hold him accountable and help the young kid out. Because he is talented, very, very talented. What you say, Rod?
Yeah, so I agree. I think with Zion has not had the real veteran, that's staying on him, the Udonis Haslams, type veterans that's gonna stay on you, so that you can be in shape. Because that's the biggest thing about Zion is young. He's a young millionaire, a young millionaire who came from nothing. So now you put a whole lot of money in his pocket, okay? And so the biggest concern for me is his work ethic. Well, that work ethic stems from the fact of he doesn't really have a veteran behind him that's going to say, here, come here, young fella, we got a problem, okay? I'm at the gym. It's 5:30 in the morning. Where are you? Oh, no, you need to get up, okay? I mean, Charles Barkley gave a great story when he came into the NBA as a 300-pounder, and he said Moses Malone grabbed him and said, dude, you fat, and you need to get yourself in shape.
Yeah.
And he started working with Charles, and Charles talks about Moses Malone saved his life because he taught him how to be a pro. Him and Julius Erving taught him how to be a pro. Zion Williamson has no one there to truly teach him how to be a pro. And so, like T is saying, I do agree. I think he just needs a change of scenery. He needs to go, and it's a great term you use, T. He needs to go to an adult team, a team that has a bunch of those dudes that's on that will not only correct him, but if they got to physically correct him, they will. Okay, right. He's gotta have that in his stable. He doesn't have that, so I don't think he's a bust. Yes, is he at the bus stop? Yep. Is he looking for the fare in his pocket to pay so he can get on the bus? Yeah, but he can be saved. I really think if he just gets a change of scenery and gets to that adult team, that he can be saved. Now, I'm going to throw you one out here. You said name a bust. All right,
Yeah.
I got you. NFL. Ryan Leaf.
Yeah.
Ryan Leaf.
That's a good one. That's a good one,
Ryan
Rod.
Leaf was an absolute bust. Okay, Ryan Leaf came out of Washington State. They made it sound like that he was the second coming of Joe Montana, and he got to San Diego, and he was a complete flame out. Okay, now, to his credit, going back, and I've listened to Ryan Leaf's story. Ryan Leaf was dealing with some issues, some mental issues, some physical issues. He was dealing with some things, but I think the hype got on him. Here's another one for you. Todd Marinovich, quarterback for the Los Angeles or Oakland Raiders. He's another one. Came out of USC. They said, oh, he was the next coming of Kenny Stabler. He was far from that. Okay. So those are two that I can think about right now. Of course, you can always talk about, and I'm tired of people piling up on Kwame Brown. We know Kwame Brown was not the greatest NBA player in the world. Now, he came into a difficult circumstance because he got drafted out of high school and then turned around and had to play with the greatest player in the game, and he couldn't mentally handle it. Okay? So I kind of, when I hear people pile on Kwame Brown, I kind of give him somewhat of a pass because you can't get drafted into that circumstance and think that he was just going to excel. You know what I mean? Greg Oden is another. Greg Oden came out of Ohio State, and I loved Greg Oden. It was him and Mike Conley. I never forget.
Yeah.
And Greg Oden came out, but injuries got to Greg Oden. You know what I'm saying? So when you say bust, the expectation, L Train, is what you're talking about. And those four guys I just named had high expectations and didn't meet them. Okay, last one. This is my last one, and I know y'all gonna agree with this one. Jamarcus Russell.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jamarcus Russell was an absolute bust, and I'll give you a quick story because I coached football out here in Arizona, and my head coach was actually a former Raiders assistant. He worked for the Raiders. He told me a story that they knew Jamarcus Russell was not reading or studying film. So they brought him into the office and they gave him a videotape. And they said, this is our next opponent. We want you to go home. We want you to review the film. We want you to come back and tell us what your synopsis is. Jamarcus came back. He said, hey, did you see the film? Yeah, I saw it. You know, we can do this, and this. The videotape was blank, guys. There was nothing on it. He told me that. There was nothing on the videotape. Jamarcus Russell could throw a bomb. He could throw a ton, but he did not love the game. You know what I mean? So I gave you those. I gave you those.
Yeah, I once heard a story about him. They said on his knees he threw a ball, 50 or 60 yards from his knees. So that just lets you know how strong the kid was. And another thing that you said that was in common, Rob, is that I think sometimes we put these expectations on these young kids. Like the one guy you said, hey, he's supposed to be the next Kenny Stabler. I think sometimes we set these young guys up for failure, having these high expectations of them from them, and then again you put them in organizations where there's not enough grown-ups around them to groom them and mentor. So it's tough. Another one, and then L-Train, I'm sure will take over. Tim Couch, same thing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he had a lot of promise, but it just didn't work out with us, And I
Yeah.
saw him one night. I never forget the first time I saw him play was at Raven Stadium some years ago at Raven Stadium against the Ravens, and he won that game. My first time at Raven Stadium. I saw him beat the Ravens, back in the day. But I just wish we could have gotten more out of him. He was a bust too.
Yeah. Pressure is something else. In my daily work, a lot of people out there know UP Nation. I'm a women's college basketball coach, and when I first started to coach at the college level, I recruited completely different than the way I recruit now. You start looking at the talent, you start looking at the stats. There's so much pressure on these athletes nowadays. Like you as a coach, you've got to dig a little bit deeper. I'm just a women's basketball coach, but when you talk about professional sports, GMs at that level, like you've got to be able to vet some of these players. I mean, you look at a guy like I'll throw a name out there, Michael Olawokandi. I remember the hype of him coming out of college, man. Ralph Sampson, and then someone close to home, like you couldn't even find anybody bigger. How about our boy from Texas A&M, Mr. Football,
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel,
yeah.
I mean, you couldn't, if you would have told anybody when Johnny Manziel came out that he wouldn't be at least decent in the NFL, I think the jury was still out on whether or not he was going to be a stud quarterback, because people said he was too small, he ran around too much or whatever. But I think everybody thought that he would have a pretty decent career. The pressure that took Johnny Football out of football got him into drugs, got him into drinking. The pressure was just too much. I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch his documentary, but it was really telling on what he went through when he got drafted from the Cleveland Browns. And a lot of these guys are just victims of pressure. And this is where, I mean, everybody knows I'm not the biggest LeBron James fan in the world. This is where I give LeBron James a lot of credit, because when that young man came out of high school, you talking about pressure, they were already mentioning him with the greats, the Michael Jordans, the Magic Johnsons. And, he could have easily folded tent when he got into the NBA, and he did not. And he's still playing 20 years in the NBA, all-time leading scorer in the NBA. So in that area where LeBron James could have very easily became a bust, but he's someone that got over the hump in terms of the expectations, the pressure, all of that stuff. To see where he is right now is just really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, it's a really interesting topic. Why people make it and why some people bust, we really don't know. But, it's something that a lot of sports psychologists and stuff looks at, and it kind of depends on what type of environment you walking into. The big story of the weekend is the NCAA tournament. I'm going to start with the women because their championship game is today.
Tonight,
by the time we publish this, the game will be done. I want to get your thoughts on South Carolina, who I think pretty much all of us had in the finals. And then Uconn, who's led by Paige Bueckers from Minnesota up here from Hopkins High School. They played earlier this year, fellas. They played earlier this year, and Uconn smacked them by 30. I don't expect the same result tonight, but who do you got winning this championship tonight?
I'm being that I was born in South Carolina and I love Coach Staley, I'm rooting for Carolina, okay? I'm rooting for them, and I think tonight is their opportunity to get their payback. But you're right, they got pummeled, earlier in the season against them, and I'm sure that left a sour taste in their mouth. So, again, I'm rooting for, the Lady Gamecocks from Columbia, South Carolina to make it happen tonight. And I've always there's certain teams, being from Cleveland, there's certain teams I've always rooted against. UConn basketball, Duke basketball, Steeler football, Bulls basketball, and for some reason, California Angels baseball.
Yeah.
It's just something about those guys I don't like.
Shaw High School,
Yeah,
East
Shaw High
Penn,
School,
Glenville.
Shaker Heights, Chanel, you name it. Yeah, you're right. But I'm rooting for the Lady Gamecocks. I think they still got that sour taste in their mouth from getting that beat down earlier in the season, so they're gonna reign supreme tonight. That's my call.
Okay, Rod, what do you got?
Man, listen, I truly believe that this is going to be a war. I am more excited to watch UConn and South Carolina more than I am Florida. Houston or Florida and Auburn. Is Auburn? No, it was
No.
Florida and Houston. I'm sorry, Florida and Houston. I'm sorry. I'm more excited to watch UConn and South Carolina more than I am Florida and Houston, simply because that young lady Paige Bueckers, I watched her, and I watched it again this morning, and I'm like,
nice.
okay, she's the deal. Okay.
Yeah.
However, listen, what Dawn Staley has built in South Carolina, it's hard to go against that. But if anybody can beat South Carolina, it's Gino Auriemma.
Yeah.
And so I really don't have a horse in the game, but if you twist my arm, would I like to see Dawn Staley get another one? Absolutely. But I just anticipate that being an absolute war, because Dawn Staley is a competitor. She's got them girls playing. They got a young point guard there, freshman point guard. She's the truth. She could play on the men's side. That her handles is ridiculous. So I'm going for South Carolina. But I would not be stunned if UConn came in and did what they did again. It wouldn't shock me. But I'm riding with Dawn Staley.
Yeah, I've got to agree with both of you guys on that. The one thing that I've learned, in all my years of coaching basketball, especially at the college level, I think you are at a disadvantage when you beat a team earlier in the year and then you've got to come back and play them in the tournament or play them in the championship because, this is all about sports psychology and human nature. There is a natural letdown. I don't care what the stakes are. It is a natural letdown that UConn and their players and their staff, no matter how you try to fight this, they know that they have beaten South Carolina once. And so naturally, you've got that a little bit of overconfidence, even though you know who South Carolina is, even though you know that, you've beaten them. So that makes you take your foot off the gas a little bit. I don't buy that it's a championship game, and I don't buy that Gino Auriemma is their coach. Yeah, that comes into play. But I'm just talking human nature. When you destroy somebody, it makes you ease up a bit. And on the other side of the coin, when you get your butt beat by 30, you circle the next time you're going to play that team on your calendar. And I'm sure the narrative has been ever since that game, we going to meet them again. We going to meet them again. And it just builds an intensity and a motivation. And that's where I think South Carolina, fellas, has an edge. Also, I don't know if you guys watch both of the Final Four games, but if you watch the UConn game, that was the most intense, highly executed defensive clinic that the Connecticut Huskies have ever put on in the Final Four. I mean, they won that game physically with a lot of energy and intensity. Here's what I know. When you put forth an effort like that, it takes a little bit out of the tank. I mean, you need a little bit more than 48 hours to recover from an effort like that. And you're going up against the best team in the country. without a full tank. You may have 85% of your tank. You may have 90% of your tank, but you sure as hell aren't going to have 100% of your tank. That's going to show up today. And in a game like this, in a national championship game, it usually boils down to possession by possession. It's going to come down to about 5 or 6 possessions either way to try to figure out who's going to win this game.
Almost like a fight, like a fight.
Absolutely. And so I just think South Carolina's going to have more in the tank. They are highly motivated. I think UConn is going to fight early, but I think eventually they're going to go away, and I think South Carolina is going to win the national championship. I have said that in the age of social media, the transfer portal, and accessibility to women's basketball and programs, I think Dawn Staley, she's not the GOAT right now. She's not the GOAT right now. I mean, you've got some great coaches ahead of her, and Gino Auriemma and Tara Vanderveer, Pat Summitt. But I'm telling you, when it's all said and done, fellas, Dawn Staley, man, she is going to be right there because everybody's going to want to play for her. Mm-hmm. She's the hip happening program, and I think there's a lot of national media that tries to undercut her because they say she's a people coach. She is also very highly intelligent. Mm-hmm. And she understands the game of basketball. So that's going to carry her a long way in this sport, and I think South Carolina is going to win the game. If you flip it to the other side, on the men's side, I was surprised Duke lost that lead late last night. Unbelievable, especially with the great Cooper Flagg.
Yeah. But
Houston found a way to win it. Who do you got in the national championship on Monday? Houston or Florida?
You just brought out a good point, Lionel. The way Houston had to come up at the end, I hope they have enough in the tank left tomorrow night, to win because they were down, but, just sheer effort, grit, and might kept them in it, and they, came back and won. So hopefully they'll have enough juice in the tank to be able to do it, tomorrow night. Now, before the tournament started, a lot of the pundits picked Houston, okay?
Yep.
Because just how they just smother you defensively, how they dive after loose balls, they play defense, shoot free throws the whole 9 yards. They're locked in. But again, hopefully they have enough energy, tomorrow night to win. And I was on the edge of my, bed last night. I was in D.C. last night watching that game, and man, I was on the edge of the bed watching them and pulling for them and rooting for them. So hopefully they have something left. Hopefully they got something left.
So, for me, watching the game last night, and Cooper Flagg is amazing, and that's another question for another podcast. Is Cooper Flagg one and done? Because this guy has the type of game that right now equates to the NBA. But we'll talk
future
about
face
that
of the NBA, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another kid on that squad, Knipple. That kid is a 6'6" guard who can shoot the rock. Okay, and I watch. They got a good big man, but with Houston played team basketball. Not that Duke did not. Their defense is absolutely smothering. They smothered Duke. And as much as Cooper Flagg tried to keep him in the game, it was hard because and then you also have to look at the experience factor. We talk about Gino Auriemma, we talk about Dawn Staley, and there are times that coaching can get you, this, L Train. There's sometimes where your girls just don't have it, and coach, you got to be that guy. And you get them because of your experience, because you've been in those big games to get them over the hump. Well, I don't know why people are not giving Kelvin Sampson here in Houston more credit. That gentleman has been through the wars. He's been there, okay? And so he understands what it takes to win this thing. Now, to T's point, and to your point, did Houston expend a whole lot of energy to beat Duke? They did. Will they be able to get up to go to and play a really good Florida team? They're really good. I'm just a firm believer from coaching basketball is that defense wins. and
Yep.
defense travels. And so for me,
Yep.
I believe that Houston is going to beat Florida based on their defensive principles and their defensive energy. They'll score when they need to, but they hunker down on defense. Just like when the Cavs really play, it's not about their scoring acumen. It's when they hunker down on defense, they become
Yep.
elite. And so that's why I believe Houston will beat Florida. I believe it's going to be a good game, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm going to watch UConn Carolina. I can't. I just think that is going to be a classic. I really do.
Yeah.
I feel it in my bones, guys. That's going to be a classic.
Yeah. One of our Warrensville brothers, Fred Ferguson, played for Calvin Sampson when he was the head coach at Washington State University. And so I still keep in touch with Fred. Yeah, Big Fred. I still keep in touch with Fred. And Fred told me that Coach Sampson, Fred speaks so highly of Coach Sampson about how he prepares his teams, how he cares about his players, and how he's able to get teams ready for big moments. I think this is Coach Sampson's time. He's been knocking on the door. He's been close, man. Florida's going to be a tough task.
Yeah.
But I think Houston is just going to be a little bit too much. And I think although Florida has a great coach, I think Houston has the coaching edge. So I think Houston is going to come out on top. Real quick before we wrap up, fellas, there's a guy, Durante Sims, who emailed me, who loves the show. He loves the triad, the triangle, the Warrensville boys. He is from East Cleveland. And so he wanted us to talk about this question. And I think we kind of did, but I think he was hitting it from another angle. We talked about Boston last week. Who was the team in Boston? And I know we kind of talked about that in passing about Cleveland. But Durante sent me a question. He said, hypothetically, if all the stars lined up and the Guardians won the World Series and the Cleveland Cavaliers won the NBA championship this year without LeBron James and the Cleveland Browns won the Super Bowl all in the same year, what would mean more? What would mean more to the fan base?
Wow. You talk about heaven. You talk about Christmas every day. Again, Cleveland is a football town, okay? It's if the Browns were to win it, that's what it would be. You take the state of Ohio, the whole state of Ohio, I think it's Buckeye football first, and then the Browns are close second statewide. But definitely in Northeast Ohio, it's all about the Browns. So to answer our homeboy's question, hey, if the Browns were to win it, that would encompass everyone. That would encompass everyone.
Okay.
So for me, from hypothetical, if that were to happen, first of all, the state of Ohio and the city of Cleveland would absolutely lose their gourds. Okay, you're talking about three teams who, if you be honest, has suffered for a long time. I mean, other than the Cavs in 2016, and even with the Guardians / Indians, they had been to the doorstep with Jose Mesa and Charles Nagy and those guys, Albert Bell. And so to answer his question, which is a great question, if the Browns won, I think it would be the Browns. I do agree with T.
Yeah, no doubt.
It would be the Cleveland Browns because they, now we heard that recently they're now accepting the championships that the Browns won back in the day. We could talk about that another time. I ain't with all that. In the Super Bowl era, they didn't win a Super Bowl. Now, but if they were to win a Super Bowl, the city of Cleveland would go crazy. They would go nuts because they're so starving for an NFL championship. LeBron gave the city of Cleveland the NBA championship. I do believe eventually the Guardians will get there, okay? But it's a Browns town, man. It's a Browns town. It's gonna always be a Browns town, you know. And the only reason that the Browns fans ride with the Browns and waiting on the Browns to do something is because we got the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes kind of soothe us over. So we kind of claim the Buckeyes. They soothe us over by winning championships, so we can at least, for football-wise, we can at least say, okay, we got the Ohio State Buckeyes. But every fan in Cleveland wants the Browns to win a championship. So to answer the question, if all three teams won a championship, first of all, if that happens, I'm flying back to Cleveland because I want to be at all the parades. I won't be at all of them. But if the Browns would probably weigh the heaviest on fans of Cleveland because they love their Browns.
Yeah, I think it's all about the emotions. You know, I think you can kind of take the Buckeyes out of the running because they've done it several times in my lifetime in terms of winning the national championship. So the fan base of Ohio have seen that, done that before. I think the Guardians, although people would be stoked about the Guardians winning a MLB championship, I don't think there's a lot of emotion, even though they've had some disappointments. I'm not saying that there hasn't been any disappointments when it comes to Cleveland baseball. There has, but there hasn't been a plethora of major disappointments. I think there's a part of the fan base that would love to see the Cavaliers do it without LeBron. But again, LeBron brought them a championship. They know what that smells like. They've seen it before. They felt it before. All of the emotion that comes with the Cleveland Browns. I mean, T, we lived right next door to each other. Our families were close. I remember Sundays, our families would get together and get food and watch the games together.
Right.
And I remember, I think it was 1980, when Brian Sipe, the Cardiac Kids, threw that interception in the end zone to the Raiders.
Sure
I
did.
remember your dad got up and he broke that record over his knee to 12 days of Cleveland Browns or whatever that was. I remember that. Yeah, I remember the fumble. I remember the drive. There's been so many emotional disappointments that have come with the Cleveland Browns. I just think that if the Cleveland Browns ever won the Super Bowl, I don't know if you guys remember that movie that came on when we were younger on NBC called The Day After. It was about when the nuclear bomb hit the United States.
Yep.
That's what the city of Cleveland would look like if the Cleveland Browns won an NFL championship, man. I just hope, I'm 52 years old, and I hope that I'm alive to see that because the people of Cleveland deserve it. The greatest fan base on the planet, bar none. Everybody talk about all these other places. You don't know about Cleveland unless you live there. As bad as that team has been in terms of disappointment, they still sell out that stadium. They're still supported. People still spend money on that team. People still are as passionate about that team. So I just want it for the fan base. I don't want it for me.
Right.
But I want it for the fan base because I know the fan base would appreciate it.
Yep, you're right. You're right. You're 100% right.
Absolutely.
I live here in Virginia, and I got a big Browns flag in my front yard. So there you go. There you go. There you go.
Well, I appreciate you guys, man, coming on again. This is the Triangle. We got to come up for a name for our show. I'm going to put it on my community post because we're getting good feedback about the show to see if people can come up with some names. And, the person that comes up with the name that we pick, we may send a little something to you in the mail. So all you guys, put it in the comments. What should the name of the show be? So, again, T, I appreciate you coming on. Rod, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks a lot for joining the show.
All right. You gentlemen have a good week and can't wait to see you again next Sunday.
Appreciate it. Hey,
right.
Remember, make your week. Don't make your week make you, man. Enjoy it.
There you go.
That's right. Enjoy these basketball games today. The women today, the men on Monday. This has been Unconventional Playbook, and I will definitely make sure to see you when I see you.
All right.